a massive dish called Timpana, white olives, and comparing Zaples. This week, we're in Malta.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. This is where we sample the world's great dishes and drinks on the Destination Eat Drink podcast at destinationeatdrink.com and on the Destination Eat Drink YouTube channel. And this week, we're in the middle of the Mediterranean on the islands of Malta. But first, if you like the podcast, please give us a 5-star review on your podcast platform. And if you'd like to support the show even more, please consider a one-time or recurring contribution at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. And thank you very, very much. Simon Bajada is an acclaimed cookbook author and award-winning photographer specializing in food and travel. His most recent project is the book Malta, Mediterranean Recipes from the Islands. You can see more of Simon's work at simonbajada.com, and you can find his cookbook wherever books are sold. Simon and I talk about eating plat Malti on the gorgeous island beaches, the famous Maltese bread, and a local liqueur made from prickly pears. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Simon Bajada, welcome to Destination Eat Drink. I'm anxious to talk to you about Malta and Malta's cuisine. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brent. Yeah, nice to chat with you.
I've been to Malta. I love Malta, but I think most people, maybe the only thing that they recognize about Malta is that old movie, The Maltese Falcon. So maybe a good place to start here is to just give us a thumbnail sketch, like where is Malta and what's the culture like there?
Sure, yeah. Well, it's south from Italy, north from North Africa, sitting out in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's a big piece of limestone rock, really, in the center of the sea there, but not so big. You know, you can drive from the bottom to the top in, well, around an hour even, just over an hour. So it's quite a small island if you think of it in terms of being a country. And then just to the north, you have Gozo, which is also Malta, but a much smaller island. And the climate's hot. Being where it is, it gets a lot of influences in its cuisine.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things about this place. You know, this place in Sicily, it's at such a crossroads being in the middle of the Mediterranean. Who are some of the people that have traipsed through there over the centuries who've influenced the culture and the cuisine?
Oh, right. Yeah, well, you have the Knights of Malta, which were like, it was a group from various parts of, let's say, Southern Europe. And then there was also the Ottoman Empire at one point. You have obviously Italian influence there, Sicily, and North Africa.
And what about the Brits? Because they were there for a while too.
The Brits have been there and they've left a mark certainly I think in terms of some of the food, you know, like there's pastries in the bakery that are very British in style. And another bonus of that is that now a lot of Maltese are very fluent in English. So for visitors, it's great if you're visiting because it's very easy to communicate.
That was one thing I found very interesting when I went to Malta is that, you know, English is actually an official language. Now, Maltese is its own language, but it's pretty difficult and you're not really going to learn it before you go there just on a vacation. But a large percentage of the people speak English because the Brits were there, and where the Brits go, man, they make you speak English. So it is an official language, even though you're in the middle of the Mediterranean. So getting around with English, not a problem at all. I'd say less of a problem than any other country in Europe.
I agree. It's really nice, positive. Yeah.
You have Maltese heritage on your father's side. And
that's right.
How did you get interested in Maltese cuisine? Did you grow up with it? Were your grandparents making these Maltese dishes? What's your recollection of getting interested in this?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was really from the first time I visited, and it was a bit of an awakening for me, actually, because, you know, back growing up in Australia with my father's family, we would always have these big get-togethers and lunches, and the meals were always, you know, there was always a lot of debate around origins of the dishes, because there's quite a bit of a mix of multiculturalism in Dad's family. And, you know, it was like, is this from Italy? Is this from our connection in Armenia? Is this from, you know, there was always a lot of chat. But what I realized upon going to Malta was everything that we were eating had its roots in Malta, like just small things like my grandmother's love of tomato paste, which is a really big thing in Malta, using conserva, they call it, which is concentrated tomato paste. And my uncle, he would always use mint on things. And then my father's auntie, she would always use certain spices that are very distinct in Maltese cuisine. So all of a sudden I was like, okay, this all makes sense. Now I understand why we're eating these dishes. And I became really intrigued in the cuisine, and came home and I wanted to cook some of the things. I looked online, and, you know, a lot of the recipes were quite dated or not so, you know, perfected, if you like. And I realized that there was an opportunity to make a collection for myself. So I started to collect and test the recipes. And then I spoke with my publisher and discussed with them the possibility of making a Maltese cookbook.
You mentioned Maltese spices, and I want to get into the dishes themselves, but kind of as an overview, what are some of the interesting spices that my listeners might hear and think, oh, that's unique, or that's different, or I didn't realize that would be something that we would be cooking with in Maltese cuisine?
Sure, yeah. I mean, just being where it is and being, you know, a port city, it's really had a lot of exposure to everything from around the world, because a lot of ships have passed through. So what I like to call it Christmas spices, because it's really broad as to what are actually used. But in a lot of the desserts, you'll find like things like cinnamon, nutmeg, star anise. And they seem to be more used in desserts than savory dishes. But then in savory dishes too, there's quite commonly a little touch of allspice. For example, I'm not sure if you remember the Pastizzi with peas in it.
Yes. Oh, my favorite. Yeah. My favorite hand food in Malta.
Yeah. So I think what makes that unique is that there's a little touch of spice in there that matches really well with the peas and onions. So, you know, spices pop up, and it's really interesting, like, where ingredients sort of are used and then aren't within the cuisine. It's almost as if sometime possibly something got left behind, and whereas it stayed in desserts, it got left behind in savory, because I think it really has exposure to a lot of different ingredients. You know, it's said that the Maltese were some of the first to have tomatoes in Europe as well. Perhaps that's why it's loved so much there. I think it's one of the main ingredients of the cuisine, I would say, tomato.
So you mentioned the sweets and these spices, what you called the Christmas spices. I love that phrase. Yeah. What would be some of the sweets that we would normally get? I mean, you know, we go into a bakery in Malta. What should we look for?
One thing that I love is the sinitsa, which is a pie that's sort of like a Swiss roll that gets rolled up inside a pie and cut into slices. That's got things like ricotta and nuts. Kind of feels like something very Sicilian, cannoli, I would say. You've also got like halva, and it's really strange that halva is in Malta, obviously, due to the neighboring countries. But, you know, this is using tahini to make it, sesame paste. And I find it odd, that sesame paste doesn't exist in any of the savory food, but it's certainly a sweet that's loved there.
Interesting.
You have bread pudding. This is something you make at home, which uses spices. So it's just leftover bread soaked in milk and much like an English bread pudding, but certainly more spiced. The bakery, you know, is probably more savory things, to be honest, because a lot of the desserts are made at home. But honey rings are one thing. These are a pastry full of dates, like a date puree that are also spiced and then rolled into a ring, and slits are put on the top. They're delicious, and they're very sort of North African in flavor because of the dates. And dates do show up a lot in the pastries.
Now, we just passed St. Joseph's Day. That's March 19th. And, I lived in Rhode Island for many years, and there's a huge Italian-American community there. And every St. Joseph's Day, everyone lines up at the bakeries to get a zeppole, or as we say in Rhode Island, a zeppole. And that's a fried fritter filled with cream. And in Rhode Island, it's topped with powdered sugar, more cream, and a cherry, a bright red cherry on top. Is there any pastry or any specific dish that we would get in Malta for St. Joseph's Day?
Yeah, well, very similar to that. Is it a deep fried
yes.
pastry? That
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So they call them two names in Malta, so zeppole or spinach, which is the Maltese name, but it's very similar to what you're explaining there. So perhaps there's some connection. Also, I think in Sicily they'd probably do something similar. But yeah, it's a puff like a choux pastry, deep fried, and then filled with ricotta and candied cherries and nuts. Really delicious. So this is something that's on the streets all around Malta at Easter, and particularly on St. Joseph's Day.
This would be my idea. I'm going to go on St. Joseph's Day next year, I'm going to go to Naples, first thing in the morning, get a zeppole, then I'm going to fly to Malta. I'm going to get another one.
Try another one. Yeah.
And
Great idea.
Try both of them, and then I can fly back to Portugal for the evening. So
yeah, that would be great.
That would be fun. Let's talk about a couple of the dishes in Malta that are in your book. And one of them that I was really fascinated with, because I love this idea of plates with different little things on it, the plat Malti. What is this exactly? What would we find on it?
Yeah, so it's like an antipasti or antipasto, if you like, from Malta. You find all sorts of different cold products to be eaten. Perfect for a hot summer Maltese day. One of the things that most certainly would be on the platter is galletti. It's a water cracker. So like a water cracker you would buy at the shop, but actually these are still commonly made at home by people, which is a nice little homemade touch. But they're just like a basic biscuit. So that kind of forms the base of the platter. And then you can have things like dips. So a fantastic dip I love from Malta is this aioli, which is like a tomato tuna dip. And then you have also a bean dip, which is something certainly North African or even possibly from Egypt, because it uses a bean which is soaked and then cooked for a long time with a lot of garlic. So that's likely on there. Then the local fresh-made cheese, gebegne. It can come in three different ways: fresh, there's a semi-cured one, if you like, and then a more aged one, which actually gets sat in vinegar with a lot of black pepper.
Oh, wow.
It takes on a really crumbly, chalky texture in a way. So that any three of those could be on there. Any place that has a menu that hints towards Maltese cuisine, they should have this platter as an entree option.
I also read in your book that it might have something on it called white olives. And I've never heard or tasted a white olive. Is that a specific Maltese type of olive?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So in the north of the island is a small town. Now, I'm going to have a problem here with the name, but I believe it's Zetun. But it's famous for growing olives. And there's a gentleman there called Sam Cardona, who has been growing olives there for a long time. And actually, he discovered that this variety was Maltese. And in the last 5-10 years, has been working towards bringing it back because it was almost becoming extinct. So really good effort from him to keep it alive. So it's a typical kind of Maltese olive.
Simon, you said that you can get plat Malti at pretty much any restaurant. It sounds to me like a charcuterie board or something like that. And this got me to thinking, would this also be something that you could, say, go to the market and buy all these ingredients and take it with you for a picnic? Or since we're in Malta, even take it to the beach? Would that be something that would be common or would be practiced?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because it's really a big part of the culture to do just that. On these very hot days, it's quite common for families to go to a local store and buy any selection of these. Even some of the, I think it's something really special about Malta in that these little corner supermarkets, it's very rare to find a big, kind of mass market supermarket. They're always quite small and intimate, and a lot of the products, like those dips I talked about, they're made on the island, so it can't be more than an hour away, and then they're for sale in these small supermarkets. So you might buy a couple of those. You certainly buy some fresh bread, hobs or fatira, the crusty white loaf from Malta, and you could buy any other things, like just a good quality can of tuna. This is very common. Some olives, fresh tomatoes, very ripe tomatoes. One thing that's done is you take a very ripe tomato. It should be so soft that you can literally just spread it onto the bread without having to use a knife or anything, because it's that soft and ripe. And that's something that families do. So they'll take the tomato, put the tuna, put some olives, and just sit seaside and enjoy these typical Maltese snacks by the ocean. Beautiful.
Sounds like an ideal Maltese afternoon to me. I don't know that it could be any better, really.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You mentioned the hobs, the Maltese bread, and I don't want to gloss over this, because Malta is one of the great bread making cultures in Europe. Could you talk about the bread in Malta a little bit?
Yeah, I agree. It's quite fascinating in that it is just such a simple loaf, yet such good quality. I've talked to many people about it, tried to get to the bottom of it, because really, I don't think anywhere else in Europe have I experienced such a crusty crust and then met with such a white, soft interior. And I think, the ovens used may have a lot to do with it, but also possibly something in the water, because I've been and seen the bakers bake it. I've seen them knead the dough, and, there's no real alchemy there of anything crazy that goes on. So it's really quite a mystery as to how they get such a nice loaf, but certainly one of the best.
Let's talk a little bit about fitira, which is, for lack of a better term, Maltese pizza. What can you tell me about that dish?
Yeah, well, the fitira is actually it's kind of like a giant bagel in a way. It's actually a bread loaf that's got a hole in the middle. And so it's really just like a different shape from hobs, which is the word for bread. It may have a crossover meaning in that it's like a yeasty kind of more risen dough pizza bread. But certainly on Gozo, there's a little town there where it's famous for these pizza breads, which are different in that the edge just comes up over. I'm not sure if you saw the recipe in the book, but there's one that's got potato and ricotta in it. Even there's one that's just ricotta sometimes. And there's two bakers there which do them to this day, as they've been done for many, many years. And I would recommend that as the best place to experience those.
I love ricotta on my pizza. It's one of my favorites, especially ricotta and potato or ricotta and spinach are two of my favorites.
Yeah, delicious.
I want to talk about this dish called Timpana. I think in Italy it might be called timpani. I know this dish. I've never tasted it, but I've seen it on the big screen. There's a movie came out almost 30 years ago called Big Night. And Stanley Tucci wrote it and stars in it. And if you haven't seen it, It is fantastic. It's one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. Might be my favorite foodie movie of all time, and great music in it as well.
Fantastic! I haven't seen that.
It's really
so
good, but
I'll add it to the list.
the center of it is making this dish like the timpana. I think they call it timpani in Italian. But anyway, it's very similar in that it's this huge drum of meat and veggies and tomato sauce and spices and surrounded by a pastry dough. Talk about the Maltese version of this.
Yeah, well, it's exactly how you described it. Sometimes boiled eggs get put in the middle.
Oh, right.
Certainly peas are in there. Peas are very common in the Maltese cuisine. But I think what lifts it is the use of livers, which may also be in the Italian recipe, and a touch of spice again, like allspice. But yeah, the trick here, I mean, for me, when researching the cuisine in Malta, for me, it looks so luxurious, and but all I can think is that when I'm making it, is how can I avoid this from being dry? Because essentially no sauce. If it's too wet, then you're going to risk the pastry not cooking properly around it. So the critical thing in making a perfect one is that that you cook the pastry through enough, but it's not too overcooked that you dry out the interior. So it's really tough dish, very tricky balance, but it's a beautiful thing. I think it most certainly has its roots in the cuisine povera, and so I think this is something that was probably made, and a lot of the dishes, the older dishes from Malta, were made to be sitting around the house for a few days after, perhaps.
Right.
So I think it's designed with that in mind. But yeah, certainly fun to make and fun to eat. I always wanted to know, why is there no sauce? And I asked people in Malta, do you add a little bit of Napoli sauce when serving it? And everyone said no. So they're doing something right there where they don't need that extra sauce.
Could we find this in a restaurant? Because it seems to me, this is such a massive dish. You're not going to order one for yourself. Obviously, it's going to come and it's going to be sliced open. But can restaurants actually make one and slice them off? Or is this just a dish that's made in the home kitchen in Malta?
Yes, it's most definitely found in the home kitchen. I have seen it in bakeries at times. They won't make an entire timpana, but they'll cook a little version of it in an alfoil tin tray. So you could try it that way. So look out in some bakeries, you might find it. Yeah. Another really popular dish, which is similar in a way, is baked pasta. So that also is found at bakeries in little aluminium foil tins.
I love a good baked pasta. I love it when the pasta gets crispy on the edges. It's so good.
Yeah, I think it's made just for that.
Right.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about this liqueur in Malta because I have not seen this anywhere else, called Bajada, I think is how you pronounce it, but it's made from distilled prickly pears. And, when we lived in Austin, Texas, I used to be a gelato maker, and a friend of mine would go out and forage prickly pears, and she would make this prickly pear juice, and she would sell it to me, and I would make a sorbet out of it that was delicious.
Wow.
Yeah, I loved the taste of that prickly pear. It's very sweet. I compared it to like cotton candy.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the flavor I find in it. It's hard to put a finger on, but it's somewhere around there, yeah. It's almost like an artificial candy flavor.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I never considered, distilling it and making a liqueur out of it. Talk about the liqueur in Malta from prickly pears.
Well, yeah, there's one company. I think that's a generic name, the Bajada, for the company. But, I think other brands are allowed to use it. But, yeah, I mean, you walk through the duty-free shop in the Valletta airport, and that's all you're seeing. It's probably one of the most bought take-home products they sell. But, I think these cactuses were introduced to Malta, likely from Mexico, and they're used around by the farmers for windbreaks or to divide property and things like that. And they, there's an excess of them in autumn at the end of summer, the fruit. And so they made a liqueur from it. In the book, I give a recipe where you make a sugar syrup, and in the meantime, you have this just a clear vodka or something that you flavor with the fruit. And then you mix the two together and you have the liqueur. And I'm not sure if the commercial product is made in the same way or if it's distilled, but my feeling is it's flavored. It's a flavored.
Interesting. So more like a limoncello, where you take the simple syrup, you add the liqueur and the macerated lemon peel in, rather than a distilled spirit like a brandy or a gin or something like that. Fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Simon, it's been great talking to you. This has been fascinating. It's rekindled my love for Malta. Only been there once, but I really had a great time. Folks can pick up your book, Malta, Mediterranean Recipes from the Islands, wherever books are sold. Highly recommend it. Great recipes, great pictures, really fascinating topic. And I thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been just a lot of fun and very interesting journeying back to Malta.
Oh, great to hear, Brent. Thank you. Thanks for interviewing me.
Wow. If Malta hasn't been on your radar, start thinking about it now. It's really one of my favorite places. I know we talk mostly about food, but the island and the city of Valletta are stunning. It's well worth it. You can find out more about Simon at simonbajada.com. I've got a link in the show notes. And that's it for this week. Next week, we're in Italy and Croatia for Pasta from Turin, a pasta named for a musical instrument, and the Pasta Boss. It's all about pasta next week. Don't miss that. Until then, get over to destinationeatdrink.com. I just posted a brand new foodie travel guide to the city of Cadiz, where they have some of the best tapas bars in all of Spain. Some even say tapas was invented there. Read that at destinationeatdrink.com by clicking on the Destinations tab and scrolling down to Spain. I also just released a new video. It's about the wine town of Fernando Po in Portugal. And don't worry if you've never heard of that town before. A lot of my Portuguese friends haven't been there either. You can see that by clicking on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com or by going to youtube.com at destinationeatdrink946. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.